Our scripture today starts with Psalm 121. I lift up my eyes to the hills. From where will my help come? My help comes from the Lord, who made heaven and earth. He will not let your foot be moved. He who keeps you will not slumber. He who keeps Israel will neither slumber nor sleep. The Lord is your keeper. The Lord is your shade at your right hand. The sun shall not strike you by day, nor the moon by night. The Lord will keep you from all evil. He will keep your life. The Lord will keep your going out and your coming in from this time on forevermore. And skipping way ahead to Luke chapter 18. Then Jesus told them a parable about their need to pray always and to not lose heart. He said, in a certain city there was a judge who neither feared God nor had respect for people. In that city there was a widow who kept coming to him and saying, "Grant me justice against my accuser." For a while he refused, but later he said to himself, "Though I have no fear of God and no respect for anyone, yet because this widow keeps bothering me, I will grant her justice, so that she may not wear me out by continually coming." And the Lord said, "Listen to what the unjust judge says. And will not God grant justice to his chosen ones who cry to him day and night? Will he delay long in keeping them? I tell you, he will quickly grant justice to them. And yet, when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith on earth?" Here ends this morning's reading.
In today's scripture, Jesus tells the parable of the persistent widow. It begins with the sentence, Jesus told them a parable about their need to pray always and not to lose heart. That's what he thinks. That's how we're led to believe what this parable is about. Of course, what follows is a short tale about a woman who comes before an unjust judge who has no interest in people, ethics, or for that matter, God. Yet because of the woman's annoying persistence, the judge grants her justice. Remember now, in the Bible, references to widows are references to the most vulnerable ones among us. That's not always so true. I mean, widows suffer, yes, in our life, but sometimes they're in a pretty good situation to change the world, right? In those days, widows were very vulnerable. It was only their connection to a husband or a father or brother, a son, that gave them any say at all in life. The widow had no recourse but to depend on the charity of others. So here, a poor, powerless person, so we don't even, just whoever is a poor, powerless person, a widow here, so persistently nags a corrupt, powerful person, here the judge, that he concedes only to shut her up. Maybe we've been in that position. That does sound a little familiar. Clearly, it is a belief in a God who seeks justice even in the midst of a world where those in power or leadership do not. Certainly, it is an encouragement for those who trust in God and God's Spirit to persist in their faith, even against the great challenges that life brings to them. Obviously, given the first verse about praying always and not losing heart, it's about the power of prayer. Jesus is responding here to his disciples' difficulty with praying, and it's a way of teaching about praying. The disciples struggled with their belief in God and their trust in their ability through prayer to tap into a benevolent divine power. And a biblical commentary produced by the TOW Project says that since we can assume that Jesus doesn't see God as corrupt, the point of the parable could be that persistence, if persistence pays off with a corrupt human of limited power, how much more will it pay off with a just God of infinite power. So I guess it's like where all you can focus anywhere. And what's nice is these scripture passages come around every third year, so you can take a different focus. I'd like to put my primary focus this morning not only on prayer, which I preach about quite often, but on the sacred nature of persistence. The sacred nature of persistence. Persistence is seen by most of us as a good quality to have, one we admire in people, not necessarily of a sacred nature though. Yet let's think about what is at the heart of the kind of persistence that Jesus is talking about in this parable. It isn't just an effective function like that of a dog persistently chewing on a bone hour after hour, or a beaver persistently building a dam with pieces of wood across a running stream, or even that of a bricklayer, stick-to-itiveness, as he places brick upon brick, constructing a wall like we see along our highways, goes on forever. Devotion, persistence of the kind Jesus means, includes the virtue of devotion. So that's kind of the sermon thesis. Devotion, persistence of the kind that Jesus is talking about includes the virtue of devotion. Devotion is what gave endurance and dedication to the widow. We don't know much about that. We don't know exactly what that was, but we know it was there. Devotion is what brought passion and purpose to her persistence. Devotion is a virtue that faithfully knows that what one is doing, what one is in service to, is something bigger than the self. Spiritual psychologist and writer Robert Sardello, in his book, The Power of Soul, Living the 12 Virtues, includes devotion as one of the 12 virtues he has chosen because of its long history in Western spirituality. Here are some of the other ones that he brings up: balance, faithfulness, selflessness, compassion, courtesy, equanimity, patience, truth, courage, discernment, thinking it through, and love. He describes what he means by living the virtues with these words. When I speak of practicing the virtues, I do not mean learning a skill, but rather recognizing that we have to work at awakening and being present to our full humanity. Awake to our experience as beings of body and soul and spirit. Sardello sees the virtues as the work of metamorphosizing ego consciousness. Anybody want to try that one? What do you think that is? Well, metamorphosizing is changing, right? Developing, transforming. Ego consciousness. Don't most of us live most of the time in ego consciousness? I don't mean that we're super egotists, but it's like what I'm doing, where I'm going, how I'm doing it, what you need to do, what, right here, the ego. Sardello sees this metamorphosizing ego consciousness and making the best possible use of our emotions to become truly flourishing human beings. Well, a virtue like devotion is more than what we do. It is the spirit in which we do it. It is not a saintly quality of our being that we have achieved. Although every time I talk about this, I do refer to St. Jerry. So, hey, I'm old now. I can keep repeating myself, right? St. Jerry Anderson, he knows who I'm talking about. Rather, we allow ourselves to receive virtue like a stream that bridges the gap between heaven and earth. Yet as we practice virtue, and balance its fieriness with our own deep thinking, virtue matures. It isn't just that, fiery, I'm going to support this political party, I'm going to go out there and save the world, I'm going to, and it fades. But it's a kind of equanimity in our devotion that allows us to grow and mature in it. A virtue like devotion is not about being a pious person or being theologically correct. It's about deepening the soul. It's about taking the phenomena of the world around you, not separate, not in some ivory tower or monastery necessarily. I think they do good work in both those places. But it's about taking in the phenomena of the world around you, its wisdom and its contradictions, its light and its shadows. It's about the epiphany of a feeling, like Marc had this morning perhaps, a feeling or a thought or an action that radically changes you in the moment, and yet it also develops in you a sense of reverence for the world around you and for the soul of another beside you. Though virtues can't be prescribed externally as fixed ways of acting, like you're virtuous if you do this, 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 and this. Nah, you're probably less virtuous if you tick them off your list. They are qualities that we can ponder prayerfully as a path of inner transformation. We participate in a virtue. We can't claim it. And there is seldom an external reward for it. Look around you. It's easily apparent that in our society, maybe in life itself, virtue doesn't pay. The old saying reminds us, however, that virtue is its own reward. Perhaps this reward is a life which flourishes because it is in balance with not only one's own soul, but the soul of the world around. In our world today, and every day, but we're living in this time, vulnerability and desperation can be found everywhere we look. And boy, I'll tell you, this week I found it when it was looking for me. Distraught teens taking their own lives by suicide or disease, bulimia. Working families who still cannot afford housing, people released from prison with little hope for decent employment in their future, children of drug addicts, a man or woman with debilitating mental illness or dementia, people of warring nations, the innocent victims of natural disasters and mass shootings, on and on and on. And finally, no one among us, no matter how seemingly safeguarded, is ever impervious to vulnerability. None of us is invulnerable. The image of the defenseless widow in this parable is compelling because the strength and endurance that she displays in the face of powerful, almost impossible opposition must come from something bigger than herself, to which she is in devoted service. So none of us is invulnerable, but we are each given the soulful capacity to flourish. Devotion will seed our hearts. We do the garden outside. This devotion will seed our hearts and minds to care and to discern, and our wills to find the liberation to act for the good and the greater good. The heaven of which many of us contemplate is a place not of this earth, typically. It's a place hard to imagine because of that, in which we hope to be rewarded for a life we have lived. This way of seeing heaven as the reward of a virtuous life seems transactional. I do this, I get that. I do this, I get that. That's a transaction. A lot of us live in transactional relationships in our lives today. It doesn't evoke, when you think about it, as beautiful as we think heaven, heavenly. It doesn't evoke a joyful and free heart when you stop and think about it, does it? Do you feel free and like when you imagine this heaven that as my due reward? At best, it's only a dutiful and bound heart. But in the Beatitudes, in the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus boldly declares, "Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth." The meek ones today may include a struggling single parent. We've talked a lot about that in our church, who raises a compassionate and socially responsible child. You know who I'm talking about. A son or daughter-in-law who cares for a sick elderly parent round the clock, many of you. A compassionate volunteer serving in hospitals, schools, food pantries, a peace group, many of you. It may be someone who finds delight in farming the land, or raising a garden, or composing music, or painting, or any of the many who teach, who heal, who support their fellow human beings. And it certainly includes those who struggle to keep a small progressive church alive in an increasingly unchurched nation. The persistence of this congregation contains something of what we mean by devotion. So I've told you this before, and actually this is all new stuff except for this story, but I'm going to tell this story again. It's worthy of repetition. Several years ago, when I was visiting a member of this congregation as he lay dying, he said something to me which I've never forgotten. As I sat by the bed, I became aware that despite his difficulty breathing and speaking, he was clearly trying to tell me something important to him, and so I leaned in closer to listen. And then he shared his concern about the many problems facing our society and concluded with these words, "Pastor Karin, you have to keep our church going. It's so important." To hear this concern for others and for the future of this church from one in the midst of his own struggle for his last breath impacted me deeply. This was the face of mature devotion. Blessed are the meek, for they shall inherit the earth. Well, contrast that with the integrity, that strength and integrity of a dying man, who the world has already forgotten, except in the hearts of a lot of us. With the buffoonery and self-aggrandizement of a politician in this election year, who'll do anything to grab media attention as he or she seeks unabashedly to remain on top of the world. Startling statements, empty promises, blatant lies, false loyalties and alignments, all the while spending immoral amounts of money badly needed by the humble souls who do so much of the good work in our communities and nation. It would be a terrible world without the persistence, the devotion of the widows, of the meek ones. Without the kind of human being who doesn't seek to be recognized or counted, who doesn't demand a payoff, who doesn't sing her own praises, who simply and deeply trusts in God's abundant love and works to share it. So I want to close today with poor old Mary Oliver. We just use her. She and Wendell Berry keep us going sometimes, huh? A poem by Mary Oliver, a very simple, brief poem, which speaks of the simplicity of a flourishing life. It's When I Am Among the Trees. Remember the one we studied, Wendell Berry did one very similar. When I am among the trees. Around me, the trees stir their leaves and call out, "Stay a while." The light flows from their branches and they call again. It's simple, they say. And you too have come into the world to do this, to go easy, to be filled with light and to shine.